Hi everyone, my name is Mary Rains and I'm the teacher behind Raining Resources. I'm also going to be the one that is putting together the Made by a Teacher for Teachers series. So make sure to check out other videos like this. Before I get started, I always like to start with what makes me qualified to be talking to you about these topics. And so I'm going to start with my education. I got a Bachelor's of Science degree in education or secondary education at Central Michigan University. I majored in English and history while I was there. After I started teaching, I was able to receive my ELL certification through Newman University. And then lastly, I have a master's degree in education and I received that through Fort Hays State University. And then looking at my experience, I've been teaching for the last 9.5 years. That does not include my student teaching experience or any of my experience prior to when I became a fully licensed teacher. I did grow up in an educational family. And so I have been helping out in classrooms since I was 8 or 9 years old. However, for the last 9.5 years, I have actually been a fully licensed teacher. I currently teach 7th grade English, and in the past, I have taught high school English. I've actually done 9th, 11th, and 12th grade. And then I've also taught at the collegiate level at Sterling College. And I actually still am on staff at Sterling. I am just not currently teaching this semester. So the first topic that I'm going to be talking to you guys about would be novel studies. However, I would like to state that a lot of these videos will not be necessarily content or grade specific. And so if you're thinking, oh, this is very English geared or geared towards English, yes, it is, or it can be. However, a lot of the videos will not be that way. So you just gotta find what you are looking for or what you would like to look further into. So hopefully everybody, regardless of grade level or content, can find something that helps them on this channel. So first off, when looking at novel studies or really looking at anything that I do in my classroom, I always try to think about 3 things. So planning, structure, and then is it standards driven? Essentially, if you have a good plan before you even start, it makes implementing the lessons, the unit, whatever it may be, a lot easier. If you can find a structure that works well for you of how you like to set certain things up, then that will also help you in the long run. And then lastly, I always look at the standards involved in whatever I'm trying to teach to my students to make sure that they really are standards driven or aligned so that I know my students are getting what they need at the 7th grade level or at the grade level that I'm teaching. So to start off with planning, here are some questions that I asked myself just to get myself started. So the first question is, what do I need my students to know before reading? Number 2 is, what do I want my students to learn from reading? Like, why am I teaching this specific novel? Number 3, what skills do I need my students to practice or to be practicing while they're reading? Number 4, how will I know how my students are doing, or how will I know what progress they are making? Number 5, how can I get and keep my students engaged? And then how can I get them interested in the book or topic that we're going to be reading about? And then lastly, number 6, what other standard skills, content areas, etc. can I pair this novel with? So to start off with, this is my structure. This is kind of like the points that I make sure I hit when I'm doing a novel study. And some of these, even though we are talking about novel studies, these can be applied to other units as well. So you can, like, if you don't necessarily teach English, you can still use what I'm giving you and apply it to your content area or your grade level. So how do I structure my unit lessons, activities, etc.? So to start off with, I always have my students almost before they do anything, definitely before they start reading, I do some sort of anticipation activity. So how do I get my students interested in the topic that they will be reading about? An anticipation activity is basically an activity that you do with your students to get them excited and anticipating what they are about to read or learn about. You should do this before you do anything else. Some examples could be, but are not limited to, anticipation questions. That's a big one that I like. Research projects, or interactive slides and activities. So some of the examples of an anticipation activity that I have done would be anticipation questions. I love to do this at the beginning of any novel study, where I look at the text, I look at the book, and I think, what are they going to be reading about, or what topics or concepts are they going to come in contact with? And then I try to figure out engaging questions to ask them to get them reflecting on maybe things that they believe about, or things that are personal to them, or even that topic. Maybe it's a controversial topic to begin with. Like, how do they feel about it? They already, by doing that, are at least being exposed to some of the concepts that they're going to learn, and they are really able to get into it and engage early on. So the example that I have right here is from when I have my students do A Raisin in the Sun. It's an anticipation question. I gave them like 7 or 8 of these for A Raisin in the Sun. This one just happens to be on the American Dream. And I asked them, do you agree or disagree? And then why or why not? It was so fun to see my kids really open up and like tell you what they believe, and then also some of their reasoning behind why they chose to agree or disagree with it was very interesting as well. Another example is down at the bottom. I have, at the 7th grade level, we read The Outsiders, and so this is a question. Again, I asked them, I think 8 or 9 questions to get them thinking about topics that they will be learning about or reading about in this novel. And so the question I put on here is, sometimes murder is justifiable, and do you agree or disagree? This one got my kid, or gets my kids every year, and they get super into it. And again, it's cool to see like what they come up with, and then what's their reasoning behind it. And then as they start reading, they're like, they think to themselves, oh, this is why we talked about it before we even started reading. This is what the book is saying about this. So that's kind of cool as well. And then the last example I have for you guys that I've done with my classes, it's kind of a combination of research and also interactive slides. And this goes with Phineas Gage, the story of Phineas Gage, and our brain science unit. These are interactive slides that ask students to go through and look at a number of different topics. And then at the end of the slides, I actually gave them a choice between 6 topics that they could then do further research on, and they became more like the experts in that topic for our class. And kids got super into this, and because I gave them the choice, also they got to pick something they were interested in, and it was really awesome to see kids being highly engaged in the content. So the next thing would be background information. I always try to give my kids some sort of activity that has to do with giving them context or background for a story. So really, this could be anything, and it also depends on what grade level you teach. I teach 7th grade, so a lot of the time, my background information I am giving to them, or I'm being very purposeful about what I'm having them look at, because they haven't mastered certain skills like coming up with their own research or finding their own credible sources, at least not yet. Those are standards that we cover at the 7th grade, but by the time they get to high school, they've definitely honed in on those skills, so it's easier for them to do. But it really just depends on what you want to do or what you want your kids to do. But some sort of background or context is always important. So some examples would be like teacher lecture, like I said, and the example I actually provide is from A Raisin in the Sun, and it's where I just went through, there was about 10 slides of just general information that they would need to know about the author, about the time period, just anything that I thought that they might need to know and would come up throughout that play. I put in those slides. Same with Outsiders. I did the same thing. Anything I thought that would come up where they might need to know it or it would be referenced in the book, I included those in slides and we went through them together, which also led to some really good discussion as well. You could also have students do some research. You could do interactive slides. You could do a scavenger hunt. That's a big one, and also high engagement for students is to actually have them go and find the information. It's even better. You can do one online, but you can also do one like around your room or around the building, and students get really into that as well. And then you could always just have them read an article as well. So for Raisin in the Sun, they actually did read an article that was on the time period, and it gave them a little bit more context. So the next part is kind of the during reading section, and I thought we would start with the standard-driven lessons that we had talked about from before. So we're really looking at what do I want my students to learn from reading and what skills do I want them practicing while they're reading. So I went ahead and I actually pulled these standards from my state Department of Education website. You can, if you teach in a different state, I teach it in Kansas, you can go on yours and find and see if they align. I'm sure that they will be similar. And also, if you're looking at this and you're like, this is great, I would really like to have this as a hard copy. These slides are actually on my TPT, or you could screenshot this part of the video so that you have it for later. But here are the skills and the standards that you need to basically make sure you're touching on while you're teaching a novel. So the first one essentially is just theme and main idea. Then we have plot and character analysis. The next one talks about like character analysis again, but it's more developing, like characters developing throughout a story, and also how they like develop or how they interact with other characters. The next one is historical count versus fictional portrayal. So that background information that I included, that you could include, that would cover this standard if you do that, so that they are really comparing and contrasting, like, this is what I know about this time period, this is what it's being portrayed as in this fictional work. The next one is vocabulary, and there was actually several standards on vocabulary, and I would like to take a moment to just bring up the fact that I think vocabulary is sometimes overlooked, and so my teacher tip to you, or my teacher's advice to you, would be, if the students don't understand the words, they don't actually know the vocabulary words, or words that are being used in the story, they're not going to comprehend the story at all. It starts with them knowing the actual words and the meaning of each of the words that they're reading. And so doing any sort of vocabulary with a novel or with anything you do is super important, and very relevant, and will definitely help your students. So just keep that in mind. And then the last one is based on citing text evidence. This also, you can pull in writing standards with this, which I'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, that you're able to use that story and actually pull out text evidence to support some of your answers. The next piece is on some of the during reading activities. So basically, what do you want your students doing while they're reading? Some examples could be packets, worksheets, plot map, character maps or worksheets, discussion questions, vocabulary activities, writing prompts, and reflection questions. All of those are things that you can do while reading. I will say my teacher tip for you guys was to be simple and purposeful with what you're doing. When I read for fun, I don't do anything extra other than read. Now, granted, I have developed the skills to be able to comprehend what I'm reading. I don't need to use reading strategies, or I do them naturally. So I understand that you do need to actually do activities with your students while they read their novels. What I'm saying by this is, or the point I'm trying to make is, don't give them so much that they don't enjoy reading. Make it simple. If they're reading and you want them to know